Hi, and welcome to the Language of Autism. Das yes, Bell Barroway here. For those of you that saw my video last week, apologies again for the abrupt ending. It was just a technical issue, lack of experience, and I didn't really know what to do, so I opted for the caption to just sort of say it's going to end abruptly rather than do the whole thing again. So I hope that was okay. Hopefully it won't happen again. So what I was talking about was texture, and I had about 5 minutes left, if that. So I'll just continue with the texture and how important texture can be, to the point where it can actually override the flavour of food. The texture can be such a wonderful experience, or not such a wonderful experience, that the flavour or the taste of food just becomes null and void. And I learnt this through an autistic young man who explained this to me many years ago when my son was just eating loads of like non-food stuff like it was the best thing ever. And he explained that it was probably to do with texture. So at least I knew the reasons why. So if your child is really, into certain foods, it could be because they like the flavour and the taste and the smell and all of it, or it could be none of those, and it could be that it's purely a textual thing, and it could be the same if they don't like something, or the texture of it just might be nothing to do with the flavour. So it's worth bearing in mind that that may well be the case. A lot of non-foods come up with textures, with the texture stuff. Like bits of rubbish off the floor and fluff and bits of paper and plastic. So it can cause a lot of anxiety for the parent if they're seeing their young child or not so young person that's autistic, that's eating all this like stuff that could do their internal bodies harm. So if it is texture and we figure that it is texture, then I suppose what we can do then is find foods with a similar texture that may well feed that part that needs satisfying. All these things that we talk about are just hopefully going to help give you some tips or some ideas or some clues as to why your child who's autistic does certain things around food. So really that was all I was going to say on texture. But it is quite a big deal. It's an important thing. So this chapter is chapter 3, part C, and it's the smell and taste of food. Now we know how personal the smell of food can be to all of us, and if we don't like the smell of something, we're less likely to put it in our mouths. And often when food is cooking, it will taste different to when it's cooked. And for that reason is why I can't eat lamb. I can't bear the smell of lamb when it's being cooked. Don't know why, so I won't eat it. I never have. I did as a child, but I found it gross. And now, obviously, I'm a grown woman. I don't have to eat it. So please bear that in mind also. So some autistic people have very strong sensory flavours. That's where they absorb intense flavours. So they may need very bland food and food that is just very, very light on flavour. We can all find out what those foods are, like spaghetti, pasta, as just an example off the top of my head. For some people it's the opposite, and they have a very low impact of tasting sensory outlets and inputs, so they will need very strong flavoured food. Like strong fish or strong sauces or strong flavoured vegetables and fruits and stuff. Others, it may be the texture and not the flavour. Remember the texture thing. So just to bear that in mind as well. But if it's a food that is a bit too strong for them, or even it's not strong enough, quite a common thing that a lot of autistic kids do is that they use tomato ketchup or brown sauce or mayonnaise or some kind of dipping sauce, or they want it all over their food, which seems to be a common thing. I've seen it loads over the years, loads of discussions about it, and quite a few autistic people have said that it's either becomes a habitual because they've had it since day one, or they love the colour and the way that it feels, or that it actually blands out the flavour of the actual food that they're eating that's being insisted that they eat. And they know they need to eat something, because everybody goes on about how important it is to eat food, so we live. So therefore they could only eat it with these strong flavours of sauces that they choose. If that is the case, then I would say just let them do it. I mean, that's entirely up to you guys, but if it means, eating can be such an issue, a little bit of tomato sauce or even a lot of tomato sauce, tomato ketchup isn't going to be a major problem. It's important that they eat their food. And even if we think it's gross that they're putting it on something that you wouldn't normally put your sauce on or your ketchup on, it's not what you like or don't like. And I think it's important to try and remember, if you can, that if your child is doing something or their eating habits are something that you think that is just really gross, try not to say that to them, and embarrass them or make them feel ashamed of their choices, because again, all these things can stop your kid from eating, and that's the opposite of what we're trying to achieve here. Another thing that comes up a lot with smell of food is that, and it happened with our son, is that he liked to smell food only and not always want to eat it, but just get the pleasure of smelling food. So if that is something that your child likes to do, and you kind of think they're going to eat everything on their plate, but they only end up just smelling some foods and others that they might smell and eat, then that's okay too, because remember the process. And remember that smelling, when you are very sensitive and sensory sensitive, smelling is a very pleasurable experience, and that may be enough for the now, at the stage that they're at, and they may not feel yet that they need to put that in their mouth. So they're experimenting, they're learning about what they like, what they don't like, what they can handle, what they can't, and they're managing this, and it can take them a long time. It can take them years to figure all this stuff out and start to really build up a picture of what they like and what they don't like, where their anxiety levels are low enough for them to be able to eat food. So please do bear that in mind, and try and allow that as much as you can. Again, their experiences of eating food to your experience is a very different thing. The taste of food is obvious, obviously, and it's a personal preference and choice of all of us. But for an autistic person, if you've got to the point where they can get through all the other senses and they're ready to put something in their mouth, then please let it be their choice. I know it's tempting sometimes to put something into their mouth, just to pop it into their mouth. Number one, you could start creating sort of some pretty bad habits, and they just won't eat and they'll just want you to feed them. Two, it's a personal space, so the more choice they have and they actually put the food in their mouth themselves means less anxiety. There's going to be a bigger trust built between you all, which means a pleasurable eating experience for the rest of their lives. Putting food in other people's mouths and they don't want it can cause all kinds of anxiety and shutdowns, and that's certainly not what you want. Another thing to remember, when you actually put the food in your mouth, it could suddenly become an absolute explosion of flavours and tastes that just are like so intense, that they may need to just swallow the food whole. And my son's done this sometimes when he's swallowed food too big and it's getting stuck and it's caused him to have to throw it back up again. So bear that in mind, that that might not be the only reason why they don't want to chew their food, but it could be one of the reasons. They just want to get it in their body as quickly as possible. So try and manage that and encourage them to use smaller bites and tear off smaller bits. It's really important, and that may be something that you need to do. Some may take a long time to chew and eat because it feels so good, it tastes so good, and it's just so yummy, that they just want to savour it or it could be because it's just really horrible and they can't figure out how to swallow it. So it's really intricate, detailed stuff here with food. And, another reminder again, loving reminder to just give a lot of space and time around meal times. There's no point saying you're going to have some lunch and you've got 10 minutes to eat it. if it's a whole, multitude of experiences, it's like try and make sure that they have plenty of time, no time limit on eating their food and enjoying it. It saves you being stressed, and it certainly saves them being stressed too. The explosion of food and the taste of that could create a physical and verbal outlet. Like our son, when he eats, he doesn't sit down, he stands up, he moves around, he ticks, he stims, he bangs, he claps, there's so many things that he does. And even some of the stims he does just around food are just unique to the food thing, and they're not stims and ticks and stuff that he does in his everyday life, which indicates to me just how intense an experience of eating is for him, because he's kind of created some new funky moves and some new stims and stuff that he has to do. Sometimes he has to close and open his eyes while he's doing it, and stop, and then freeze, and then it's just a whole array of different things. So don't be surprised if that does happen. Sometimes he lays down. Sometimes he laughs and he laughs. Sometimes he has to bang doors and things. It's just so many different things which helps him process the food that he's eating, that he chooses to eat for himself, but he still needs to do all these things in order for that to happen. So please be aware of that, and accept that as the process with your child continues through their lives, some of these behaviours and outlets may change, may disappear completely, or may just change into other things. Where they may only be able to stand, it doesn't mean that they will always have to stand for the rest of their lives. It may mean that they do, but it might not. So just please remember the process. It takes a time. It's really, 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 really been just lovely to share the senses and food. And obviously the stuff that I've talked about has been from my son's experiences and our experiences personally, but also spending many years reading, listening, talking to autistic people across the country, the world, of all different types of people that are autistic, sharing their food experiences and sensory challenges and joys. There are so many other websites out there, and there are many YouTube channels and Facebook groups run by autistic people. I urge you to join those groups, and if you want to receive information, the truth about autistic behaviours and perspectives, then I really urge that you do that. This is where all of my information comes from our own experiences and that of other autistic people in my life. So I'm very grateful for that, and I just want to share it with anyone that needs to have it shared. So please subscribe to my channel by clicking on my little picture, to make it easier for you to receive these videos, so you can share it with others you feel may need it. And next week I'm going to be talking about food, but mostly about the environment, the location, and the eating materials, plates and cups and whatnot, and how that can impact an eating experience for your autistic person in your life. Okay, thank you for listening, and I will see you next week. Bye for now.